So we're going to get started with the second portion of today. Today is the writing. As I said at the beginning of the workshop, you can go to the website and find this document so you can follow along. It's the teacherwriter.net for those who just got here. The teacherwriter.net, you go to AP Writing, Student Resources, you'll find it there. All the information is there. All right, so we're talking about writing the essay, and I already covered this information, so I'm going to get started with the introduction. We talked about doing three things in the introduction, and I say that these three things are crucial for the entirety of the essay, so that these three things should happen in this order in the intro. Do they need to, can you move some things around? Sure, I think that's fine. For the most part though, the introduction has these three elements and it follows this specific pattern. So, first you establish the topic of conversation. I'd like to look at paragraph 1 of the prompt to see what it is that they're giving me as information to the task that they give me in paragraph 2. And I take that information, I rework it, take out a few things, add a few other things, paraphrase a few other things, and with that I begin my own essay. So if you're wondering, how do I begin? Look at paragraph 1 of the prompt, see how they frame the information. That may be useful to you in framing your own introductory sentence, okay? So, establish a topic of conversation. When you establish a topic of conversation, you're letting the reader know that we're going to talk about the place of STEM education in the classroom. Or, we're going to talk about the things we should consider before creating a monument. Whatever the prompt may be, right? Then you contextualize the conversation and you establish a stance. So, in order to contextualize the conversation, what you have to do is you give an overview of the information. Some people like to do a pro and con, right? Or you mention how one side believes the following and another side believes the other. So, let's say the prompt is monuments. What are the factors that we should consider before establishing a monument or creating some sort of memorial to the past, right? Let's say that's the prompt. While X should be considered when creating a monument, the most important factors should be Y. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. The contextualization of the conversation can happen in different ways, and this is one way in which it can happen. You essentially provide the lay of the land. Okay, so say that your prompt is STEM education. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here for a second. I'm going to go to the prompt. Let me go to this one. This one is the place of handwriting in today's schools. I may use the first paragraph and say that the contextualization of the conversation is that the world has moved in a certain direction where handwriting is not as useful anymore. Or, if I'm going on the other side, I may argue that since the world is moving in a direction where handwriting has become obsolete, all the more reason why we should create specific classes for it in order to maintain that education, because it is crucial to our development. I don't know. But you have to contextualize the conversation, right? The contextualization works in such a way that you establish the parameters of what you're going to talk about. So, let me go back here.
Hypothetically, if you were to read the prompt and decide okay, I'm going to take this approach and I'm going to see it this way, is there any way you could go too far with or too specific with that?
So Maria asked me, could she miss the prompt if she gets too specific? I don't think so. I don't think so. The prompt is wide enough that you can find your place. You can find your place. That shouldn't be a problem. The third point is presenting your thesis. Now, I said at the beginning when we were talking earlier that your thesis for synthesis kind of sounds like the answers to the what and how. What am I trying to say and how am I going to argue that? The thesis should feel like a roadmap for the rest of the essay for your reader. The reader should read the thesis and say, okay, I see how you're going to argue. So for instance, before an agency or organization creates a monument, they should consider the significance of that person or event in its relevance to its immediate location. And they should consider the cost of creating and maintaining the monument. There it is. What and how I'm going to talk about it. Now my bodies are respectively Section 1, which is the relevance, and Section 2, which is the money. So you create a roadmap in your thesis that then your reader can follow you into bodies 1 and 2, right? Your concern is less, what am I trying to prove to you? Your concern is more, what evidence can I use to show you what I mean? That's what we're evaluating. All right, I'm going to move on. Questions about the intro? All right. So here's a complete introduction. This one is about the penny. Throughout the last decade, let's look at an introduction for monuments. All right, so monuments are typically constructed to commemorate historical figures and events, creating a sense of admiration around the concepts that they display. They establish a topic of conversation, monuments and why they are created. Then, the process of creating and implementing these memorials is complex. That's the nuance. Yes, they're important, but in order to make them, we should be aware of a lot of little details. Okay. It requires thorough planning to ensure it reflects the significance of the past while logically fitting into modern times. Several components must be recognized and analyzed prior to breaking ground for celebratory tributes. Okay, so that's the context of the conversation, right? The context of the conversation should answer a question. Why are we talking about this? Why does it matter? So she's telling you, monuments are important. But if you want them to be important, then you should consider a lot of factors before you make them. Okay, the most important factors to consider when memorializing an event or a person, here's a thesis and the direct answer to the prompt. As well as constructed monument for the same cause, are the meaning and the relevance of the structure itself, as well as the impact that it has on its surrounding environment. That's it. Very general ideas that she will develop in each body. The first body is the relevance of the structure, and the second body is the impact that it has in the surrounding environment. Right? Because when you create, let's say, I don't know, the Korean memorial or the Vietnam memorial, they have an impact on their environment because they're large. Lincoln as well. You have to consider the immediate impact that the memorial itself or the monument is going to have on its surrounding environment, right? Is there nothing there except the thing, right? Are there places for people to go and wait and see the thing, right? Like it's a destination location, exactly. So what I like about this intro is that it's very thorough. It understands fully what it's trying to argue. Okay, let me go back. Good job, Olivia. And Sean. All right. Let's go to the body. Okay, generally, I'm going to tell you generally what the bodies do, then I'll tell you specifically what the bodies do. Okay, so generally the body begins with a claim. This claim stems from the thesis. So point 1 about the relevance, that's going to be my introductory sentence to body 1. Talking about the relevance of the statue to its immediate location, or the relevance of the person or the event being memorialized to its immediate location. Right? That's sort of like what I'm going to talk about first. Now, this claim becomes the focus of the body paragraph. You have to remember that the first sentence of a body paragraph, the first sentence of a paragraph dictates the focus of that paragraph. Now, there are other approaches to writing wherein you may begin with evidence in the body, and then you lead to a conclusion, which is that sentence that I'm talking about. But in the way we're writing, for the most part, the first sentence of the body is topical, and it determines what the rest of the body is going to look like. Okay? That's just the way we're writing it. Can you write it another way? Yes, you can. I'm just not teaching that way. The other way would imply beginning with evidence. explaining that evidence, relating it to other evidence, elaborating on that connection, and then sort of funneling all the information into a focal point, which is your claim. That would be the way in which other people write it. They write deductively. I'm teaching you to write inductively, wherein you begin with a claim, right? And then you go down into the ramifications of that claim. Okay. So, you first begin with a claim, then you support that claim, and then you provide insight for that claim. That's it. Now, how do you support that claim? You quote, you summarize, you explain, you elaborate, you connect, right? So generally, this is what you're doing. Claim, support, insight. That's it. That's all you're doing. Let's talk about what you're doing specifically now. Here we go. Those are the 7 steps. Take a second to look at it, write it down. Some of you are following along in the PowerPoint. So first, you establish a topical sentence. That is one reason in defense of your thesis, and that reason will dictate the rest of the conversation for the body paragraph. It's the first thing you do. Then you present evidence from a source. Then you explain that evidence. Now, when I say 1 through 7, I am implying 7 sentences, right? I'm not saying that you are confined to these, but on average, 7, 11, those are the numbers for a paragraph, from 7 to 11. I say 7-Eleven so you can remember it because it's a great store. You should check it out. Okay, so if you write from 7 sentences to 11, you should be okay for a paragraph. Body. Okay. Present evidence from the source. Explain that evidence. Present more evidence from another source. Relate that evidence to the previous explanation. Then connect the evidence as provided and relate them to the topical claim, and then offer insight. I really mean the word reflection is really what I mean. Offer reflection on what you've been discussing. If you think about it, you're organizing a lot of information. You're beginning with a claim. I'm going to talk about the relevance of a statue or the monument to its immediate location. Then I'm going to bring up this evidence from source A, which says X. And then I'm going to explain what that means in relation to the point I was trying to make. Then I'm going to bring up evidence from source B, which says Y. And then I'm going to explain what that means. Now I'm going to try to connect my evidence together or connect my explanations together. Now I'm going to reflect on everything I've been trying to say. I'm going to wrap up the body and move on to the next one. Right? As a general rule, we never end a body hinting to the next body. Right? We end a body wrapping up that body. We shouldn't end anticipating the next body. That's the job of the first sentence of the next body. That's not the job of the last sentence of the previous body. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? That makes sense? All right. I'm going to show you an example. Again, this is Alina's essay and Shauna.
It is essential for those creating a monument to consider the burdens that may be placed upon local economies in addition to the resources needed to construct these memorials in their designated locations.
So that first sentence tells you where we're going. If we're going to create a monument, we got to consider the burden upon the local economies in addition to the resources needed to construct the memorial in their designated locations. These are things we got to think about. Okay, now let's see how they unpack that claim. Go ahead.
An example of this is in Savannah Memorial Park, where developers are trying to remove the memorial to implement infrastructure in its place. And those in favor of protecting the piece of history are fighting to sustain it.
Source D. So there's a paraphrase of information there, right? Go ahead.
The costs associated with maintenance of these monuments are often overlooked, leading to them being constructed on figuratively unstable lands.
Now, notice that there's explanation surrounding the paraphrase. That's what I was saying, that when you're quoting or paraphrasing, when you're referencing information, there should be a clear attempt from your part to engage meaningfully with the source. And the best way to do that is to demonstrate the fullness of the thing that you're quoting. Like, what does it mean? Why does it matter? Right? Oh, Savannah is moving, they're moving this thing from here to there. Okay, but why does that matter? Is it poor planning? You have to consider the ramifications of the point that you're trying to make. And this body does that. Go ahead.
They require an immense amount of time and energy to ensure their longevity, as seen in Savannah, where the association fears a lack of resources to preserve the memorial.
So that's a pretty good way to blend the quotation, right? It's a small quotation, but considering that they've explained fully what is happening, that quotation is enough to validate the point they're trying to make. Go ahead.
Another instance of a lack of money affecting a monument's development can be observed in 1939, where a tribute statue of the Maine lobsterman was hastily finished
Insufficient funds?
due to insufficient funds. Because it was poorly made and unfinished, the statue was vandalized, repaired, and ended up in a warehouse where it was eaten by rats.
I love the way they connected that information. They give you this background. So who was it? Lisa, were you the one that was asking me about how can you have a sentence
Oh, yeah.
wherein you put all that information? That one is a pretty good example in answer to your question. So another instance of a lack of money affecting the monument's development can be observed in 1939, where the tribute statue to this, right, was hastily finished with insufficient funds. Because it was poorly made and unfinished, the statue was, quote, vandalized, repaired, and so on, eaten by rats, period. So they explained briefly prior to the quotation, and so wrapped it up.
Also, like when we're quoting like a source, do we put like the title of the source, or we just start talking about it?
Right, there are different ways of engaging with a source. You can either mention, this is called the attribution, right? You can either mention the writer, mention the
The year.
the source,
Can you also
right?
say
Like
the year?
like the New York Times column, right? You can mention the specifics of it, like source C. Let's see. If you were to say, for instance, here, I think she does that here, because she says, yeah, I can't see it. There we go. Look, the statue of the Maine lobsterman. That's not the name of the article. That's the name of the statue. So what she did is that she took source F, is it? Yeah. Source F, didn't call it a name of the writer, didn't call it the name of the article or the publication where it came from. She just called it that statue within that article, and you just have to attribute it to something.
But at the end, do you put like parentheses source?
Right.
Okay.
And that's crucial. Every time you cite, that's the citation, right? Attribution, quotation, citation. That's usually how it goes. Now there's another one I'm not mentioning, which is contextualization, right? Attribution, quotation, citation. These are the usual four whenever you're referencing a source. Okay, so in constructing the memorial, go ahead.
In constructing the memorial under unfavorable circumstances, the artist allowed the statue to become the subject of deprecation and destruction.
So this is a commentary that she offers after explaining why it is important to plan accordingly before constructing a statue or having the right amount of money. Otherwise, it can be destroyed. Go ahead.
The location and resources available during its formation played an integral role in the way that the statue is regarded, eventually creating a platform rooted in disrespect and lack of appreciation. Besides its effect on the local economy, it is important to consider the cultural impact of a monument to its location. The history that characterizes the location of memorials such as Mount Rushmore is essential to remember when examining the impact it has on locals. Source C exemplifies a possible reaction to the monument, stating, "It was bad enough that white men drove this
The suit.
Sioux from hills they still hold sacred. Did they have to carve faces all over them too?" The spiritual and cultural value of the lands of the native tribes, like the Sioux and others, must be valued when creating a monument, especially one so permanent and large like Mount Rushmore. As historical memorials became the normalized method in honoring the past,
Here she's ending the paragraph. You can tell because she begins with "as historical memorials." The word signals a slowing down, right, of pace. So she's done giving evidence. and she's done well. She's, I think, used 3 sources, F, G, C, and I don't know if there was another one up there that I'm missing. But it's at least 3 sources used 4 times. Okay? And then after that middle portion is done, now she's going to wrap up the body. She doesn't wrap it up in the last sentence. She begins to end. She begins to end in the previous sentence, in the penultimate sentence. Go ahead. As historical memorials.
As historical memorials become the normalized method in honoring the past, it is vital that the encapsulating environment surrounding the physical tribute be recognized. Location is nearly as significant as the monument itself, so analyzing the way in which local economy and contributions will be impacted is blatantly necessary.
And there it is. The ending of the paragraph signals back to the beginning of the paragraph. It's a closed loop. All the information is covered. We're done. Move on to the next body. Okay, now let's go back to the instruction. So, I want to say that so far, everything is covered. We present the topical reason from the thesis. We provide evidence to support that. We explain that evidence. We elaborate on that evidence. We relate that evidence to other evidence. And then we wrap it up with insightful, reflective information that relates to the original claim. And that's it. You call it a day. Right? I think, any questions so far about the writing of the intro and the body of the synthesis essay? Okay, so let's try it out. Can somebody say it back to me? How do you write a body? Is it behind me? It's behind me. How do you write a body? Give it to me as simply as possible. Yeah.
You have to state your claim, that's support your claim, and then your insight, which connects to the.
Yeah. So Erica says, present your claim, state your claim, sorry, she says, which is more than present. State is a better word. State your claim, then support that claim, then provide insight to that claim, which relates to the claim itself. Yeah,
And you have to argue, but not too much.
I agree. I think there's got to be a clear sense that you're trying to demonstrate something, but you're not necessarily, it's not an argumentative essay. So you don't have to feel the burden of having to prove everything. You just have to demonstrate that your evidence makes sense. You have to demonstrate that your evidence makes sense. That's it. That's what you're doing. All right, conclusions. Conclusions are difficult.
This is pretty easy.
This one is the most accessible of the 3 essays. So you should be okay. Conclusion paragraph. Many of you will have difficulty writing the conclusion. I want to say that's true of every essay. For whatever reason, you have difficulty writing conclusions. A lot of student writers do. I have two ideas. One, you barely get there. That's probably why. That's one of the reasons, right? And 2, it's barely taught. I don't know why, but you're barely taught how to write a conclusion. We emphasize a lot of intros. We really work through the body. When we get to the end, we're like, just call it a day. But let's make sure that we begin first by establishing that a conclusion is not an end. It's a conclusion. Do you notice the difference between an ending and a conclusion? You notice the difference? Just because you got to the end doesn't mean you're writing the end. You're writing a conclusive statement of everything you've been trying to say. I need you to think of it that way. I don't need you to think of it as the end. The end is easy, right? The end is so I talked about this, thank you. I'll see you around. Great. That's an end. But you're not writing an end, you're writing a conclusion, right? That what is the point of everything you've been trying to say? So let's say that you've been writing about a problem. The problem is, what should we consider when memorializing an event or a person? Maybe you should come up with a solution right at the end, right? Maybe solutions are a good idea in your conclusive paragraph. So I like the idea of presenting your final thoughts on the evidence, right? I like the idea of slowing down the essay, indicating to the reader, I am ending. And I like the idea of drawing final insight about the thing you've been trying to say. So, how to write a conclusion successfully in ways that you can understand it. I would go to the end of every body paragraph, my insightful sentence. Whatever I said in the end of paragraph of body 1 and body 2, I take those 2 sentences, right? I put them through a blender, and whatever sentence comes out at the end of that, That's usually my beginning sentence for the conclusion. Did that make sense, or I need to say it again? I go to the end of each body. I see what meaningful stuff I came up with at the end of each body, then I put it together. And that usually gives me a conclusion. How else can I write a conclusion, right? Look at the claim. Conclusions aren't so much about the reasons, the becauses, right? I don't care about hows and whys. I care about whats. So conclusions should really be a reiteration of the original claim. What I've been trying to say is when if you really want to create something that memorializes the past, if you really want to preserve the things that came before us for the people that come after us, then we got to do it right. We have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of planning before we start breaking ground. You see, that's it, that's a conclusion. It's just a claim dressed up and made pretty, which is another point that I want to make. Make your conclusions pretty, okay? All your dollar store philosophy, that's what it comes out. All your pretty sentences and your beautiful words, that's where it comes out. If you want to take a chance, I'm going to answer your question now. If you want to take a chance in your essay, you do it now. Okay? So Lisa's asking, how do you not repeat yourself?
I always repeat myself.
Huh?
I always repeat myself.
What was that?
I feel like I always repeat myself.
Yeah, she said it 3 times. I always repeat myself. You would have done it 4 times if I asked you again. All right. You always repeat yourself. Okay. I'm going to tell you, I don't think that repeating yourself is a bad idea. I think repeating yourself without adding something fresh is the problem, right? There's a difference between being redundant, right, and being purposefully meaningful, right? Repetitions in writing are very common, very useful. So think about what have you said. You know what is another way of writing a conclusion? This may answer your question. You look at your essay quickly as you're reading it, right? And you think about, what haven't I really answered yet? What haven't I said? Or what part of the essay did I not fully explain? Right? You can target that in the conclusion. You can target that in the conclusion. Does that make sense? So don't think so much about whether you're repeating yourself. Ask yourself, am I saying the same information but delivering it in such a way that I'm adding a fresh idea? So repetition is not the problem, it's redundancy. Okay, so that's the conclusion. Let's look at Alina's conclusion. Yeah. All right, so, because it's just an idea. What was I going to say about the conclusion? So that's an abnormally large conclusion. I want to make that clear. You're not going to write a conclusion like that. This is an essay written by 2 people at home together. They had time in class. This essay does not reflect a normal construction. So if you were looking at the body, you were like, oh my gosh, I got to write all that in 40 minutes. No, you're not going to be able to. But they already got a 4 before the end of the body. You get what I'm saying? So, all right, here we go. Conclusion. I was going to say something else about the conclusion before we read it. Oh, right. Okay, so in the order of composition, synthesis is the first essay you're going to write. 95% of you are going to write this essay first. When it comes to the conclusion, it is likely you'll write it first. So my recommendation is write a conclusion. Okay, argumentative is likely the last essay you're going to write. So if you write argumentative last, which you're likely to do, then if you don't write a conclusion, it's bad, but it's not as bad. Because it's the last essay, you ran out of time. I think we keep that in mind. But it's very, very weird for the first essay not to have a conclusion. Okay? So when I score your synthesis essays, and I look at your essay and I say you didn't write a conclusion, that's lazy. So I think it's a bigger deal not to write a conclusion for this one than the other ones. Okay? So make sure you do write a conclusion for the synthesis essay. We'll talk about the other 2 later on. Okay, let's read it. Ready? Rosie? Good, Rosie.
There are many implications that must be analyzed and carefully weighed before a monument can be ethically constructed. Selecting a favorable location that perfectly complements the memorial while allowing the tribute to grow and blossom along with its dynamic surroundings is vital in building a commemorative piece of art. Some memorials may also disrupt the economy of the areas that they are placed in, so the resources needed to sustain such creations may be determined beforehand. Outlining the meaning and significance of the person, place, or thing that is being depicted is necessary for the monument to fulfill the goal of inspiring the masses and preserving history. Historical monuments require an excessive amount of background research before the first slab of concrete is laid, as they serve as a permanent reminder of the most temporary illusion, time.
Cute. It's a nice last sentence. Okay, so this essay, this conclusion, if you want to bring it down to its specific moving parts, there's a lot of summary, and then there is that last sentence that is a reflection of the claim. You see that? Realistically, the day of the exam, you don't have to summarize everything you said. So a brief overview plus the reflective claim should be enough. A brief overview and a reflective claim should be enough. Remember that one key to summary in the conclusion is this: you're never summarizing your essay. Why would you summarize an essay that takes me 1 minute and 30 seconds to read at most? You never summarize yourself. You summarize the idea of what you've been trying to talk about. Their conclusions are never, I'm sure you've been taught that conclusions are a summary of what you said, right? You probably have been taught writing like this. Tell them what you're going to tell them. That's your interest. Tell them, now tell them what you told them. That's basically how you've been taught writing, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, now tell them what you told them. Your conclusion should not be a summary of everything you've said because you just said it. It was 3 paragraphs. I read it. What do you think, I forgot? So what you should do instead is summarize the thing that you've been talking about. Okay? And then briefly. And then provide a wrap-up sentence. Right? That is reflective and meaningful and cute. You want to be cute. This is a very boring essay. So you want to be cute.
Why would you want to be cute?
You do want to be cute. When I'm reading your essay and I see like, oh wow, this person is like lame. They probably took capstone or something. I need like emotion from you. Put some makeup on it. You know, like make it cute. At least at the end, be cute. For God's sake, be cute. All right, pacing of the essay, let's wrap it up. Pacing of the essay. 15 minutes for reading the sources. 40 minutes for writing the essay. My recommendation, read the sources in 12 minutes if you can. Use 3 minutes to begin planning. Start writing. Okay? Try to end by minute 35. Try to end with 5 minutes extra. Take those 5 minutes, throw them into rhetorical. They will help you finish that second part of the second body and the conclusion. And then you'll have 40 minutes for argumentative. Unless you want to take 5 from each. 5 from synthesis, 5 from argumentative, and then make the rhetorical 50 instead of 40. Guys, you have to figure out a way to dedicate more time to rhetorical. You cannot reasonably write your rhetorical essay in 40 minutes. You cannot. Not as well as you would like it. Let me give you a breakdown. How much time do you have to write the rhetorical? You said 40. You're wrong. Why?
55.
You need 10 minutes for reading, annotating, figuring out what the hell you're doing. 5 minutes for the, can I curse on camera? 5 minutes for the oh shit moment, like you're writing something, you're like, oh shit, like, oh, I messed up, oh man, right? So those 5 minutes, you lose. You lose those 5 minutes throughout, at the end when you're rereading, when you get stuck and you don't know where to go. These are 5 minutes you're going to lose if you're lucky. That means you have 25 minutes of composition. 25 minutes. If you're good, if you're industrious, you have 25 minutes. Chances are a lot of you are going to have 20 actual minutes of composition. Can you realistically write a 4-paragraph essay in 20 minutes? That will give you a score of a 4 or higher. That can be difficult. What is one way to remedy the problem? steal time. I mean, another way would be better, but that's right. Like we have to work with what we've got, and you're going to increase, and you have increased, but there's only a certain pace at which you can increase. So stealing time is one of the things we're going to have to learn. Okay? I'm teaching you to steal. That's what I'm teaching you to do. Lisa, did you ask a question?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask what's the order? Are you teaching us in the order that it's gonna be on the thing, on the test?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Could you repeat the pacing that you gave us for the synthesis test?
Right, the pacing. Hang on. I think I have it here. Gee. Yeah, so 15 minutes for reading the prompt and the sources, but I said read it in 12 minutes, and then I said write the essay in 35. I think you could. How many of you have written rhetoricals already? I want to say everyone here, right? If you have written a rhetorical successfully within 40 minutes, then you can most definitely write the synthesis within 35 minutes. I've just given you 15 extra minutes. Also, the amount of thinking that you're doing in synthesis is not comparable to the amount of thinking you're doing in rhetorical. Right? Rhetorical, you're doing all the heavy lifting. In synthesis, you're putting things together. That has to be a more feasible way of writing for all of you. Okay, let's move on. Any questions about synthesis before I move on? Erica?
A while back,
Wait.
I don't know about back, but and when you're talking about the body and about the topical sentence, you know how your thesis is supposed to be comprised of the points that you're going to be talking about throughout the essay?
Yes.
Is the topical sentence one of those points?
Say that again?
Is the topical sentence one of those points?
Yes. In the thesis. Yes. Yes?
For time, you have 15 minutes at the beginning and then 40 minutes for all the rest of the essay. You don't get like 10 minutes in between for like reading.
No. So that's a good question. You get 15 minutes for reading the sources.
All of like the prompts, all the prompts.
No. Only the sources for synthesis. And then 40 minutes for writing each essay. Now, I'm going to tell you what Alina did. Alina did rhetorical first. How long did it take you? Alina got a 5.
Probably like 45 minutes. I gave myself like 10 minutes
Extra.
max. Yeah, 10 minutes max to read rhetorical, then write it, and then I did argumentative, and I maybe took like 35 to 40 because I plan out my argumentative, and then synthesis, whatever you have left. So like, don't take that long reading the sources for synthesis.
Just take what you want.
Yeah.
We said it earlier. Eat the meat, spit out the bones, right? Take what you can from the sources and write your essay. Put it together. Now,
Yeah, like.
no, but that if
Not everybody's out.
if some of you listen. Think about what I'm saying. You're going to read 4 to 5 passages and answer 45 questions in an hour. Then you're going to take a 10-minute break, but you're not going to take a 10-minute break. You're going to say 10 minutes, and then you're going to get up and go pee, right? And then eat a bar or something, and then 5 minutes into the break, they'll say, okay, start heading back. In the exam. That's how the breakdown of the exam is. Between multiple choice and the essays. So then by the time you head back and you start writing the essays, you're still relatively fresh. If you delay the more complex task for later, that may be more difficult than beginning with it. I still maintain, for the sake of timing, that synthesis first, rhetorical second, argumentative third is a good model.
How about?
It's a good model because synthesis feels like an easier task. Maybe it warms you up to the writing. Then rhetorical maybe like gets you going. What I fear about rhetorical last is that you might, if it's last, then whatever time you got, you got. So I would never do it last. So argumentative, if you can see that you have, 20 minutes left, you can pick up the pace. Like you know how to accommodate an argumentative because you're the one doing the whole thing. Okay, let me get going to argument.